And that is also one of my biggest advice to my sellers is when we get these multiple offers, that price is, on our contracts, that price is right there at the top. And I always say, we need to keep reading. Keep reading the rest of the contract.
Page 1, section 1, price.
Price.
There's a bunch more, 5 pages.
Yep, 5 more pages. We need to really dig into the rest of these.
Welcome back to the Modern Agent Podcast. My name is Logan Ricchetti with Modern Realty. This podcast is a combination of thoughts and opinions on the real estate market in Midland, Michigan with our local real estate agents from Modern Realty. Our mission is to create informed and confident buyer and seller clients, so tune in to learn more about Midland's real estate market. What is your current advice to home sellers managing their expectations now in today's market?
Okay, so that's a great question, especially because I've just had 2 listings that have hit the market in the last week. So I've been having these conversations a lot with sellers, and it seems to be a very common theme really throughout my whole last year. So the very first thing, when I sit down with sellers and have that consultation, sometimes they ask me, sometimes they don't. Sometimes I know it's in the back of their mind, but I always address the question of, if this is a seller's market, the days on market are low, we're getting great offers, why do I need to still do all of this work on the front end? Professional photography, staging, an in-depth comparative market analysis. Like, why don't we just throw it out there? Buyers are desperate. They'll go for it, right? And that is not the case, because we still have homes. If you pull up the MLS, they're still getting days on market racked up because they rush the product out into the market. Buyers in this market, and really what I've noticed in the last year with the shift of interest rate, is that they have the mindset that they are paying more for the same house, more than what they would have paid a year or 2 ago. So their expectations have shifted. Therefore, it's still in our best interest to put the best product out on the market, and that means doing an in-depth comparative market analysis to make sure we're in the correct neighborhood for list price. We pick that list price. Now we need to make sure the house we're putting out there matches that list price. You can't put out a $300,000 house and not have it cleaned or staged because a buyer's going to walk in and say, the square footage is there, but this is too much work. That's the other thing too. With how much buyers are having to spend extra today, they're having less money in their pocket to be able to afford repairs, paint, things like that. So when I talk to my clients about this, I offer all of those services. It's not that my sellers are necessarily having to do all of this on their own. I'm handling a lot of the professional staging. If you still have furniture in the home, I come in, I do the consultation for you and really help work with what we have. If the home's vacant, I have really gotten into virtual staging. It's very fun for me, honestly. I love doing it, and it looks great when we list the home because there's a balance with staging between having a blank slate and helping people envision themselves in the home. There's a very fine balance between that. Of course, there's always the depersonalization, things like that. We don't want buyers to be distracted when they come into the home. We want them to focus on the features, the great features of your home. And then once we do all of that work, we want to showcase it. We want to put it out there and have it shine when it lists on the MLS, and that's what professional photography does. Every single one of my listings for the last 6 years, no matter what price, has gotten professional photography. Because, I'm sorry, a $500,000 house and you see my hand in the mirror in the bathroom taking a photo, that never sets well with buyers. So that is something that I always address with sellers, especially in this market, is that yes, this is an awesome market to be selling. This is going to be exciting for you, but we don't want to skip these steps.
So in this market, when the days on market goes from, say, 15 days to closer to 60 days and things are starting to shift in a more balanced manner, and you roll out a listing and it hits day 7, 10, 14, 15, and you haven't seen an offer yet, what do you advise the client?
Well, again, during that seller consultation, we address that because one of the things we're talking about is my CMA. We sit down, we look at the data together, we're coming up with that price range that the market's suggesting we list at. There's a beautiful thing with the market, and it is the magical invisible hand of the market. The market will tell us if we have shot too high or if we've shot too low. Right now, sellers are more worried about shooting too low, leaving money on the table, things like that. That's when you get multiple offers and the market will drive that price back up. It's a really great safety net. Now, if we're on the opposite side, say there's been a shift, seasons are changing, school's starting, interest rates are changing. There's things that happen every single day. We might have spoken about a price 2 weeks ago, and something's happened in the last 2 weeks that's made the market shift. The market's going to tell us when we start accumulating days on market and we're not seeing any offers. Our contingency plan is that we are going to be reviewing our feedback, hearing what the market is telling us. And if the market is clearly telling us, hey, you have a good product, it's not the best product, we feel like it's a little too high, or we're not excited about that we'd have to spend money on these repairs, then we're going to do a price adjustment. And that's okay. Like I said, the market shifts every single day, and it's better for us to make that adjustment on the front end than have 30, 40 days on market and then decide to do that adjustment because okay, fine, the market's not biting. Because at that point, people are looking on Realtor.com and Zillow saying, what's wrong with the house? Mm-hmm. And everybody does it. Every seller, every buyer at some point has done that. And there might not be anything wrong with the house. The market just shifted at the time we listed and we were overshooting a little bit. So it's always better to be proactive because at a certain point, 30, 40 days on the market, we're going to be looking at a bigger price adjustment than if we had addressed it 7 or 10 days in.
Yeah, not to mention if you're 30, 40, 50 days on market, you have more mortgage payments, more interest payments, more utilities, taxes.
Yep. You're racking up those bills and you're getting more antsy to get out from under it and move on to your next home. Or maybe you're already in your next home, so now you're making 2 mortgage payments. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you got that house sold a lot faster, sometimes you can kind of dodge that second mortgage payment, which is always really nice. Yeah. So timing's important. And that's something I talk a lot with my sellers about is, what are our goals with this sale? Is it a situation where we just, we want to just make the most money we can? I mean, everybody likes making the most money they can. Or is it more beneficial for us to have a quicker sale? Or are we looking for, something that, maybe I had a client that they'd never lived in the property. It was a family member. My clients lived out of state. They'd only ever been to the house one time, like 10 years ago. So for them, we discussed that an offer that would have a very clean inspection contingency, that's what would actually be the big ticket for them. So that's a really good conversation and to have with a seller and for as a seller to think about is a big price tag is great, but sometimes that's not always the most beneficial for you. Like you said, if you're trying to get out from all those payments, then we need an offer that's going to be maybe a little less, but it's going to get us to the closing table quicker, which in the long term saves us more money.
Yeah, and I think the way you roll the house out the first time is 90% of the effect. Mm-hmm. Either you roll it out the right way or you don't.
Absolutely.
And your agent's job is to convince you to do the things that you don't want to do at the outset. Mm-hmm. And when you say you don't want to do it, it's your agent's job to say, I know, but we got to do it. And here's why. Yeah. And our job as agents is to help to explain to the clients exactly why these difficult steps, these difficult actions, painting a bedroom, changing out a carpet, whatever they are so vitally important to the overall success of the listing rollout, which is the number one most opportune time to get an offer and to create urgency and to create, that demand. Pricing the house is equally important, but if it doesn't matter if you have the best price in the world, if it doesn't look great and it doesn't show great, you're not going to get the competition. You're not going to get that fire between the buyer A, B, and C to compete with each other and go for it. And then if you do start too high in that range, you're definitely not going to get a competitive environment that drives the deal to the absolute highest market value. You're going
to find yourself paying for it one way or the other, honestly. And that's the thing. Buyers right now are looking every single day. They're waiting every morning. They're checking Zillow, Realtor.com, their agents. We're checking for our clients. So when that new listing does hit, there is a lot of excitement. There's a lot of clicks on it. So you should be getting and taking advantage of all of that attention you're getting because as soon as that really 7 to 10 day window closes, the buyers out there have already seen it. And they're not going to really circle back. They're just going to keep looking for what's coming on next to the market.
Exactly right. It doesn't mean that if your house goes 7 to 10 days that you're doomed. You're still going to sell the house. It's still going to get a buyer. That buyer that buys your house might not even be in the market yet.
True.
But like you said, at that initial rollout stage, when you're fresh, you're new, you're hitting new listing alerts to 100 buyers in the market. That is when you want to strike.
Right.
So having that house prepared adequately ahead of time is crucial. It's critical. It's non-negotiable.
Right.
And Emilee will help you. Emilee has amazing staging capabilities. She knows unique staging capabilities, I should say. Most people don't know anywhere near as much as she does about how to optimally and cost effectively and time effectively prepare the house for sale. So what are a couple of quick tips? Go a little deeper than the average, clean the windows, but what do you need to really focus on?
So something that I talked about to my clients or even people I've staged for in the past a lot about is that it's not just about taking down your family photos, things like that, cleaning the windows. We have two main objectives when we stage. We have how the house looks for photos and how the house looks for when people tour. And those are a little bit different. There's some things we can get away with when we are having photos come in. Like I told people, if you're running out of time, just shove it in closets. We don't take pictures of closets or your garage. You get a little more time. But when we take photos, we want to stage your house, that's setting up furniture, color palette, things on shelves in a way where in the photos there's nothing distracting. There's nothing that is drawing the eye specifically to this corner over here. We're not just selling this corner of the house. We're selling your whole living room. So when I come in and stage, I talk a lot about furniture arrangement. We might have to shift some chairs, which might feel awkward when we're standing in the room, but it's what's going to look best in photos. Now, vice versa, once photos are done and that's what's out there on the market, now we're also going to focus on some things that when people are standing there in person, looking at the room with their eyes, they're going to see more detail. One thing that I always pick out and notice, because we kind of become nose blind to our homes, like nose and eye blind to things, nicks on baseboards and doors and walls, chipping paint, especially basement stairwells, where the kids are running up and down with toys, those walls get really beat up. We stop seeing that stuff because we're living in our home. So I always remind people those are the small details we need to be looking at because those are the things that sellers will notice walking into your home, seeing it for the first time. And sometimes when they see those items, it's a red flag. They start saying, well, they obviously haven't repainted and, these door jambs are really beat up. It starts to create the feeling that maybe the home hasn't been very well taken care of because they don't know you. They don't know your family. They don't know that you have 4 kids and 3 dogs and you guys love to live in your home, and that's great. But they're picturing themselves now in your home. And it also starts to rack up a to-do list for sellers.
Yes.
Even though they're really cheap
buyers.
Thanks. It starts racking up to-do lists for the buyers that are in the home. Even though it's something as easy as taking like a Mr. Clean magic eraser and shining up your baseboards, that's still something that they're like, okay, on top of moving and packing and getting all of our things into the home, now we also need to repaint all the trim. We need to clean this. We have to, fix this stuff. And it starts to create this really long list and can become overwhelming, honestly, and can be sometimes the decision maker between your house and the other house that listed that week. And there's such small items. But those are the things that I come in and really zone in on. Light bulbs, burnt out light bulbs. We stop seeing them. We think, oh, we'll fix it next weekend, and we forget. That shows up in pictures, that shows up in showings, and again, just creates that really long to-do list for potential buyers that buyers don't really want to always deal with.
Hey, look, when we have a buyer showing a house, we're trying to get that buyer so excited that they will fight and compete and scratch and claw for that house. Yep. They're going to compete with another buyer to buy that house. Anything in that house that goes against that concept hurts it.
It does.
And I know a light bulb is a $2 fix, but when you have light bulbs out, when you have trim that needs to be cleaned up, when you have things that need to be taken care of and they're not, that creates that list of objections for the buyer. And it might not be the reason a buyer doesn't buy the house, but it might impact how much they pay for it.
Exactly. And I have buyers right now, not all, but I have some that they know how hard they're going to have to fight for a house. So unless they're walking into a house that they feel like I could leave it all on the table for this house, they walk out.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I'm not going to fist fight for this house when
I got to do this.
When I got to do this, and I have all these, this list of to-do lists, I'm just going to wait for the next house, because that's the other thing is that buyers, I feel personally, and at least what I've seen in my buyers, they are going into the market now knowing what they're going into and knowing that they might have to wait a while. So they're becoming a little bit more okay with that.
Yeah. It's so interesting to see these dynamics shift a little bit over the course of both of our careers. We've been in buyers markets, sellers markets, and everything in between. And like you said earlier, the market is constantly shifting. The dynamics of the market, the dynamics of the time of year, interest rates, inventory on the market, all these different factors can play into the success or the failure of your listing experience based on when you're listing your house. So you have to take all these factors into consideration, and you want to do all the things that you can control. You don't want to make any unforced errors. Not cleaning the carpet is an unforced error, right? You can't determine whether the Fed raises or lowers interest rates, but you can control whether your kitchen is spotless.
Absolutely. I have a listing that actually came out today. It's a condo, and it's the week of Christmas. But for my sellers, we need to keep moving forward. It wasn't going to benefit us to wait.
Right.
We couldn't do it any sooner. And we've had that conversation. We've talked about, hey, here are the headwinds that we have no control over. But they had the carpets cleaned. I did virtual staging. We have a house cleaner that came this morning to make sure everything was spotless before the sign even hit the yard.
Good.
Because those are things that we can control. So then we know that if we do hit 10, 15 days on market, we know that it was things that we could not control.
Right.
It was headwinds that we knew we were walking into, and you become more okay with that. You go in with a better mindset, and you're more prepared, and it makes it less stressful. Because this can be a stressful process because there are so many things we can't control. But if we control the things that we can, that helps for a less stressful process.
All right, let's switch over to the buyer life cycle for a minute. In this current market condition, how do you advise a buyer?
So that is a conversation I have been having, and I'm pretty good at having because I've been having it for about 2 or 3 years at this point. It's funny, back when I started in 2018, my buyer consults and advice were much different than they are now. But this really just seems to be the status quo now. I discuss with my sellers, first of all, I talk about what's causing this market to be the way it is. And that's overall, it's low inventory. And I explain what's causing it and that dynamic, because there's so many people that come into my office and I don't know what they've been being told by friends and family, friends who bought houses, family that bought houses, people that hear things on the news. So I try to address that of this is what's going on, at least in our market, and what's causing it. This is what you're walking into. Then I talk to them about the tools in my toolkit. It's not always you have to give up your firstborn child to get into a home. There's been homes that I have had buyers purchase this year where we were not the highest price necessarily. Yes, that's very, very important. And if a seller's determined that that's their number one priority, it is what it is. But I talk about your contingencies in your contract. Here are some options you're going to have. I don't ever want my buyer to walk into the market or walk into a multiple offer situation and feel completely out of control. And I talk to them about that. You're going to have a lot of options when we get to that point. And they do. There's a bunch of different ways that we can structure an offer that works for buyers, that helps out a seller and kind of puts together those puzzle pieces for them to get the deal together. And I feel like that really helps a lot with my buyers of taking a deep breath, because you can tell when they walk into your office, especially my first-time home buyers, they're like, we really want to do this, but we're really scared. And it is scary. It's a big purchase. And that doesn't matter what market we're in. It's always going to be that feeling when you purchase your first home. But I really dig into, you are going to have options. And at the end of the day, you're not going to offer something that you don't want to. And that is something that some people agree with me saying, some people don't. But at least with my clients, I've found it helps a lot of there's not going to be at any part of this process where you are going to be forced into doing something that you don't want to do. And that helps them feel more in control. It also helps that when we are in that multiple offer situation, they're going in much more prepared. They've almost always had that conversation with their parents or with their significant other of, what will we be comfortable with? What aren't we comfortable with? So when we do get ourselves into that high pressure situation, it doesn't feel so out of control.
I will say that having an agent helping you through that process is incredibly valuable. And more importantly, having an empathetic and a patient and a non-threatening agent is even better. Because if you're in that scenario where you've never bought a house before, or even if you have, it's scary, it's overwhelming, it's intimidating, and you don't know how to handle it. And it's just like any other service that you get value from having somebody help you, like an attorney or a doctor or an accountant. You need a realtor to help you to understand what you need to do to have a chance of being successful without doing more than you need to do.
Right.
So in other words, protecting yourself, but you just don't know. I mean, there's no way you could know if you've never done it.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know.
I do this every day. I've done this every day for many, many years. And even when my husband and I bought our first house, it was still scary.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hilarious because I'm like freaking out and I'm like, I do this. I've already helped so many people do this, but it's a big step. And as your agent, I say, here's the house that you love. And I will be completely honest with you. This is what you would need to do to get this house. This is, I've done my research. I've reached out to the agent's talked to the sellers. I've gathered all of the intel that we can possibly have. This is what it's coming down to. Are you good with that? Or are you not? If you're not good with that, then this is not the house. If you are good with it, great, awesome. That's why I did all of that legwork for you to figure out, like I said, what are those puzzle pieces that are going to make this deal come together?
What are those puzzle pieces?
So a lot of times, price is a huge thing for sellers, for buyers. But what I've found is I dial into those contingencies in your contract, your inspection, your appraisal, what you're offering the seller. Because for sellers, it's not always price. Price is important. If you're coming in way low and there's somebody much higher than you, then sellers might take a little bit more risk on this deal that's offering substantially more. But if it's coming down to our offer and one other and the prices are close, which happens a lot, I mean, we're talking within just a couple $1,000s, those sellers are going to start going down the rest of the contract. And it might be really important to them to have a very clean, quick deal. This house is in a state. They need a quick sale. They're not, emotionally attached to it, things like that. They just need to be done and move on. The sellers live out of state. They can't do inspection repairs, things like that. So as buyers, we can start to offer like, hey, we know this is really important to you. This is what we're comfortable offering. We're going to have it pre-inspected before we make our offer. So we're going to have an inspector come through with us during our showing, have our inspector who's working for us look at everything. And if we're good with it, we're going to give you an offer taking out that inspection contingency. This is one of my favorite tools because it does not leave my buyers unprotected. Because by the time we have made an offer removing that contingency, it's because my buyers already know that they are good with it. Eyes have already been laid on the property. They're good to go. Everything looks great. I probably shouldn't be giving away my secrets on this podcast because this does work really well for my buyers and for a lot of sellers. Because for sellers, it gets the deal done really quick. That inspection is a big hill for sellers to get over. Sellers get very nervous about inspections. Even if they say like, everything looks great, I've taken really good care of the property, there's that kind of worry that there could be something that comes up. So if as a buyer, we're in a position where we can accommodate that and help remove that worry for sellers, I've seen sellers take, a lower offer because it's less risk and it's a quicker deal. Same thing with appraisal, depending on your financing. Sometimes we can make offers for appraisal of, covering some differences, things like that. That kind of that could be its own podcast, I think, on its own. It's kind of digging into that. But for buyers, it's just knowing that, for sellers, it's not always just price. Sometimes they really need a clean deal and clean contingencies. And if we're able to offer that, then that can really help us stand out from the other offers on the table.
Yeah, there are several deal points other than price that matter in an offer. You have your earnest money deposit, your home inspection, you have your appraisal, you have your loan approval contingency. Sometimes you have additional contingencies like the sale of your existing home as a condition of your loan of your offer. And then there's all kinds of other stuff, seller concessions, closing date, occupancy dates. There are so many different factors that go into the structuring of an offer that people make the mistake oftentimes to think that price is the only one. Now, obviously, for 9 times out of 10, price is the most important one. But like you said, it's not the only one. And sometimes for a seller, there are other factors more important or equally important than price. And I'll give you an example. everybody thinks that the selling your house, you're trying to get the most you can get. And that's absolutely true. But imagine you're in a scenario where you have two offers. One of them is $100,000. One of them is $99,000. Obviously, you're going to take the $100,000 offer because that's more. But what if the $100,000 offer has a bunch of contingencies in it, things that have to be met, conditions of things that have to be met for that buyer to perform, or the offer for $99,000 has no contingencies? Which one are you going to take? The answer is not black and white.
It's not, because that $100,000, you're going to get $1,000 more, but you have a lot of roadblocks between that point and the closing table, which can then sometimes result in $0.
So let's look at it another way. What if it's $100,000 with a bunch of contingencies, or it's $95,000 cash with no contingencies, or 90 or 85? There's a point at which the risk for the seller exceeds the savings, right? So that is a decision the seller needs to make.
Yep.
And it's something that has to do with the way you structure your terms. And you as a buyer, some of these terms you have to have in your offer. If you have to have financing, you have no choice. You know, if you have to have occupancy right away, you have no choice. There are things that you can and can't control, but the way you and your agent structure the terms of your offer can have a massive impact on the chance of the success of that offer.
And that is also one of my biggest advice to my sellers is when we get these multiple offers, that price is, I mean, on our contracts, that price is right there at the top. I always say, we need to keep reading. Keep reading the rest of the contract.
Page 1, section 1, price.
Price.
There's a bunch more, 5 pages.
Yep, 5 more pages. We need to really dig into the rest of these. I get sellers that, well, but this one's cash. You never turn down cash. We've been told as a society, cash is king. You never turn down cash.
Yeah.
Cash is awesome. Cash has a lot to offer. But once we start reading into the rest of those pages, then we start seeing that there's a lot of those contingencies and a lot of those roadblocks that are not matching up to what we really do need out of the deal. I had a house this summer that we had this exact conversation, and it was so difficult because I'm like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, it's your decision. I'm just laying out risks and rewards. And it was so difficult for the seller because they had to kind of break that thought pattern of, I have to accept cash. The police don't show up if you don't accept cash, by the way. Cash is great. And if you can work out a cash deal, that's amazing. But I've had cash deals fall apart. I've had cash deals that went south very quickly. So it's always a good idea to truly review every single one of your offers and options, not just solely based on price, because there might be an offer that's a little bit less, or it's financing versus cash, but it's going to be a cleaner cut, more secure deal. You're going to there's a better chance of you getting to the closing table.
Well, there are really 2 main differences between a cash offer and an offer that has financing. The first one is the loan approval, and the other one is the appraisal. When you have a cash offer, you typically, not always, but you typically don't have to have an appraisal done on your home, which is a contingency of the offer because there's nobody requiring it. So unless the buyer requires it, which they usually don't, you don't have that problem. And then the other big problem that you avoid with a cash offer is you don't have to have a buyer go through a loan approval process, which takes weeks and has all kinds of roadblocks and bumps along the way. So those are the reasons why a cash offer is better than a financing offer. Typically, cash buyers know that, and they typically want a discount because they know their offer is easier. And that's where this conversation comes into play, where you have a cash offer that's typically a little bit less than the financing offer. And then you as the agent and then you as the seller have to have a really hard conversation with no clear answer about what's best. And like you said earlier, I love the way you said that. Your job as the agent is to lay out the risks and the rewards for both options so that the seller can make the decision.
Yep. And I am always behind my clients, and I say this, I am behind you 110%, whichever way you go. And that's true. I don't ever push an offer because there could be 3 offers on the table that are really great options. That's a good day.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to lay it out of like, just pick one of these 3. They're all fine. That's not it at all. It's which one of these do you feel the most comfortable with? Do you feel is the offer for you? And then that's the one that I'm going to get under contract and work for you.
Let me ask you a tough question.
Okay.
Let's see what you got. I don't know the answer, but I'd just love to hear your opinion. If I got you an offer for $100,000 contingent on inspection, appraisal, and loan approval, and then I got you a cash offer for $97,000 with no inspection, appraisal, or loan approval, and those were the highest and best offers from both buyers, and I'm the seller, and I don't know what to do, how would you advise me as the seller?
So it's very interesting that I'm getting this question because I did have a deal this year that was cash. Top dollar, no contingencies, what we call the golden egg offer. And it was easy peasy, accepting moving forward. They didn't show up to closing. And that was talk about a hard conversation. That was hard. And it was a huge realization of like, until the ink is dry on the contract, nothing is for sure.
Yeah.
Even with a deal that has no contingencies.
Yep.
I'm going to start looking into, they have the inspection contingency, but what are the terms of that inspection? Are they doing for informational purposes only? Are they saying that they will, cover up to $500 worth of repairs? What are the little extra things those buyers put into that inspection contingency? Same thing with the appraisal. Are we just doing straight up appraisal? Are the buyers offering to cover up to $5,000 or $10,000 of a difference? Because all of those little details shifts that conversation. Because again, you have the contingency there, but sometimes buyers can mediate that risk for us. So for me, and I guess because of what I do and what I've seen, if I was a seller, I would really consider the one with contingencies just as much as the cash. But that's just me because I've seen like worst case scenario happen.
Yeah, you're anti-cash right now.
I'm not. I mean, if I could take cash offers to my sellers, that is a great day. But it's just because I have seen how things are not done until you are at the closing table. Now, if you feel like you have, this deal is really clean, these people with cash, they're super excited. They've communicated that they love the location, they love, all of these things about the home. Then yeah, in really too, it's another option to accept the cash and then accept the financing was a backup offer. That's an option as well that I've had clients do, where just in case something happened, we kind of had that little bit of a safety net. Now there's risks that tie into that. Are those, financing buyers going to stick around? Are they going to agree to it? But that is, I feel like I have a little bit of a unique perspective on that question.
I would agree with that.
Especially after the last 6 months.
What I would do, in addition to everything you said, is the first thing that I would do right away is I would get as much intel from the buying agents about who the buyers are and what their scenario is. Because to me, you can't make a fully informed decision as a seller which route to take, which offer to take, until you know that the cash buyer is moving in from California and they're coming in this week and they're looking to buy a house.
They're living in a hotel.
Yes.
They need someplace to go. They have that urgency.
See, that's a data point that changes the dynamic, right? It adds to the dynamic. The financing contingency offer is a first-time buyer and they're 23 years old and they just started a job and they have 3% for their down payment and they're really tight. And we've called their lender because the agent let us and we found out that he's going to do everything he can to make it happen. So now you got 2 more pieces of data that change the equation. Now there's more. Let's say that the cash offer can close in 2 weeks. The financing offer is going to close in 6 weeks. 2 things can happen there. Number one, it depends on the seller. The seller might really be excited about a 2-week close, but the seller might also be terrified by that. If they have 4 kids and 3 dogs and a husband and and a mother-in-law in there,
or their next house hasn't closed yet, or won't close in time.
Right. The point that we're making here simply is that the situation for the seller and the dynamics with the buyers can dictate which offer is best, and it has nothing to do with price.
Right.
The price is the lever. The price is the thing that tips the scales to the rest of the factors. If you have a 2-week closing versus a 6-week closing and you have $1,000 mortgage payment every month with taxes and insurance, that means that every 30 days costs you $1,000, which means that there's an extra $1,000 between the 6 weeks versus the 2 weeks of the cash deal, right? So now that $100,000, which is $3,000 better than the $97,000, is only $2,000 better when you add in the month of holding costs. So now your decision is a marginal decision now down to $2,000. You follow?
Absolutely.
That's 1/3 less than the marginal decision started. Right. That's where we as agents have to help our clients understand risk. And then this is where I would help them close on the decision, as I call it. I would say, okay, Emilee, we know that this cash offer will close in 2 weeks. We know that this one will close in 6 weeks. We know that marginally the difference is $2,000. Here's the question that will help you make the decision which route to take. If we take the financing offer and it falls through for any reason, would you regret it? Would that $2,000 not have been worth it? And if the answer is yeah, we'd probably regret it, then I'd say go cash.
Yep.
If they say, Logan, it's $10,000 between cash offer and financing offer, we'll take our chances. If it falls through, it falls through. But for $10,000, we're taking a shot.
Right. It's all the higher risk, higher reward, and weighing those. And that's different between just each person. There are just low risk people, and there's just people that are more comfortable taking a little extra risk.
Yes.
And a lot of times it pays off.
Yes.
And that's why it's so important as agents that it never feels that we're pushing one way or the other, because we don't know, it's not our decision to make. And we don't know how our clients react to those. I tend to be a little bit more of a low risk person when it comes to my personal life. You tend to be a more high risk person. Stresses me out sometimes. So how you and I would look at those offers if we were selling a house, it would be different.
Well, I will say for sure, if I'm the seller in most scenarios like this, I would be much more attracted to the cash offer. And the reason why I personally would, even though you describe me as high risk, which maybe I'm a little bit more inclined to take a risk or two, to me, the marginal risk between the cash offer and the financing offer is not worth the risk of taking the financing offer because of the inspection, appraisal, loan approval, and the time.
Right.
The cash offer might fall through. Well, the financing offer might fall through. In other words, that systematic risk is the same.
Yep.
Buyer remorse is the same, whether it's a cash offer or a financing offer.
Absolutely.
People change their mind. They get in a fight. They lose their job. Things happen.
Life changes. And sometimes it's not even the buyer really wanting to back out. Things can just change. And that's something that I talk about with sellers with any offer. There's not any offer out there that is zero risk of some sort. By listing your house, selling your home, purchasing a home, you are taking on a certain level of just inherent risk. We try to manage that as much as we can and kind of have a plan for all the different ways that this can go. But there's not ever going to be that offer that is a guarantee all the way to the very end.
I would say that a cash offer starts with an 80% likelihood of closing. A financing offer starts with a 50% likelihood of closing because they want it. They've written it down that they want it, but you still got to do inspection, appraisal, loan approval.
And there's a lot more people involved.
More people, more stuff.
You have underwriters, you have the lenders.
Yeah.
And most agents will know, or people that have kind of gone through the process, they play just as big of a role as we do. At a certain point, like once we get through inspection, the ball is kind of out of our court. It's not, I mean, I don't want to say it's not in our hands anymore, but now there's a whole nother team that are working on our file trying to get us to the closing table. And so there's a lot more people involved with that financing offer than cash. Cash, you have the bank saying, yep, they have the funds, they're there. Let us know when you want us to wire them. It's a very interesting conversation, and I've found with my sellers over the last few years, it's very exciting to get multiple offers. It's exciting to sell in this market, but sometimes that is a source of stress. Yeah. When we do get 10 offers, okay. I mean, I've found with some of my sellers, if they get one really great offer or two really great offers, they're almost a little relieved because they're like, hey, we didn't have to dig through 10 offers and kind of outweigh all these different scenarios. We had option A, option B. Option A sounds great. Yeah. Or we get one. I had clients that we got one really great offer, and for them, they're like, this is what we wanted. This is what we were asking for, and they're giving us what we're asking for. We didn't call for highest and best. I offered that to them, and they're like, we're good with this. We're good to move forward. It all comes down to your sellers and their personality profile and having all these conversations with them. So as an agent, you kind of have an idea of how to go about it when you do get all of those offers.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Modern Agent Podcast. Please follow at Modern Realty Midland on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you need to buy or sell a house, please reach out to Modern Realty by going to www.modernrealty.us. Modern Realty, your home, our focus.